Welcome to this explainer brought to you by Forge College. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in. Okay, so in our previous lesson, our capstone overview and integration plan, we essentially laid out the perfect architectural blueprints for your Solana application. We mapped out the structures, we wrangled those JSON layouts, and we basically drew a magnificent, highly technical house on paper. But today we are putting on our hard hats. We're transitioning directly from that capstone planning phase into drafting concrete Rust code. We're going to customize the solana-program-template to make those theoretical blueprints a living, breathing, compiling reality. Let's dive right in.
Here is our architectural flight path for today. Blueprint to real code, building the state module, wiring instruction enums, serialization test harness, debugging byte mismatches, and we'll wrap up with conclusion and next steps. Starting with section 1, blueprint to real code, translating the layout. Because honestly, a plan is great, but code that actually compiles is what runs on the blockchain. So let's look at intention versus execution. On one side, you've got your data layout document. This is your theoretical JSON tables and your schema mapping. It's neat, it's tidy, and it literally does nothing on its own. On the other side, we have the concrete template code. These are the actual Rust structs, enums, and module boundaries that have to compile and execute under cargo build-bpf. Today is all about bridging that exact gap. We are translating those JSON tables directly into Rust with millimeter precision. Which brings us to section 2. Building the state module, where we create our on-chain structs. Our first major construction step here is creating a brand new src/stoats.rs file. This is going to house our on-chain account structs. But to really understand why we format this file the way we do, we have to talk about Borsh-serialization. Think of Borsh-serialization like meticulously packing a highly unyielding suitcase for a flight. If you try to pack your fixed-size socks and your variable-length jackets out of the planned order, the suitcase simply won't close. Borsh is this rigorous process of converting your complex data structures into a flat, linear sequence of bytes. And Solana relies on this entirely. The exact ordering and the size of your elements are strictly enforced. If your Rust code says name, then ID, but your layout document says ID, then name, Borsh packs the suitcase backward, and the blockchain is going to politely refuse your transaction. So the golden rule for this entire architectural drafting session is this. Field order determines your binary footprint. You absolutely must place your Rust struct fields in the exact same sequence as your layout document. Here's a quick pro tip for you. Always try to put your fixed size types like a standard U64 integer or a Boolean first. Doing that minimizes padding differences across different system architectures. Then, if you've got a variable length string, toss that at the end if you can. Your job right now is strict transcription. You omit nothing, and please, never reorder fields just because it looks aesthetically pleasing in your code. Moving right along to section 3, wiring instruction enums, or how we actually handle incoming actions. So, state is great, but it's passive. Now we need some action. We are moving from passive account state to defining how we actively handle incoming instructions using complex enums. We're going to follow a really strict 3-step sequence to wire this up. Step 1 was that state module for account structs that we just talked about. Step 2 is creating complex enums for our instructions with explicit discriminants. And step 3 is wiring those boundaries by updating our src/lib.rs file to import and expose these new types. Because, you actually have to tell the template's entry points that your brand new state and instructions exist in the first place. Now, Borsh handles incoming instructions in a very specific way. It doesn't just send the word init or update over the network. Nope. It serializes enum variants using a tiny 1-byte U8 discriminant. It's basically a name tag with a number. When you're building these complex enums in Rust, you have to explicitly number the variants so they perfectly match your schema. For example, init is 0, update is 1. If you just leave this to Rust to auto-number for you, an update might accidentally be read as a delete down the line, and I promise you, that is not a fun day at the office. For really advanced cases where you're migrating versions, you might even find yourself using manual trait implementations just to perfectly control those variant numbers. All right, let's jump to section 4, serialization test harness. Time to verify the build. We've written the code, sure, but we're engineers, which means we trust absolutely nothing until we test it. To make sure our new building doesn't just fall over in the breeze, we have to build a local test harness in a new file called tests/serialization_tests, RS. You really need to stop and ask yourself, do your serialized bytes perfectly match the blueprint? because if they don't, your program is going to fail on-chain. And we definitely do not deploy to the mainnet just to find that out. We run a local test, construct an example account, serialize it, and print out the raw byte arrays so we can verify it, literally byte by byte. So what exactly does success look like here? When you run that local test invocation, you are looking for 3 very specific checkpoint signals. First, absolutely no compiler or linkage errors. Clean build. Second, the printed serialized arrays must match the hard-coded test definitions from your layout document perfectly. And third, assertion successes, meaning no panics. If your terminal lights up red and the test panics, that printed output right before the crash, that is your absolute best debugging clue. Which smoothly brings us to section 5, debugging byte mismatches. Because let's be real, your test is probably going to fail the first time.
Experiencing failing tests is a classic rite of passage, so let's just embrace it and decode a quick diagnostic cheat sheet to hunt down those mismatches. Symptom 1, you see extra bytes at the start. The probable cause is an unexpected discriminant. The quick fix is to go check your enum write order. Symptom 2, entirely different numeric bytes. The joys of endianness. Solana and Borsh use little endian format, so the least significant byte comes first. Just confirm you're using the right U64 or U32 types. And finally, symptom 3, a length mismatch for strings. Borsh specifically prefixes variable length collections, like strings, with a U32 length indicator, so you need to verify that U32 prefix is actually being accounted for in your expected bytes.
And that brings us to section 6, conclusion and next steps. We are officially ready for integration. We have successfully transitioned your blueprints into real tested compiled Solana template code. But if you take literally only one thing away from this explainer, let it be this. The data layout document is the authoritative source for all code-level decisions. It's not a suggestion. Whether you're tweaking a struct or manually implementing a Borsh trait, that layout document is the ultimate source of truth. If your code deviates from the document, your code is wrong.
Now that your template is deeply customized, aligned byte for byte, and tested locally, you are completely ready for the rigorous continuous integration checks and differential testing we're going to cover in our next lesson. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer brought to you by Forge College. Be sure to visit our website at forge.college to learn more about this and a ton of other fascinating Web3 topics. But before you go, I want you to ask yourself this. If a single byte misaligned in your local test environment can break your entire struct, what unseen vulnerabilities do you think are silently compiling in the smart contracts you interact with every single day?